Hello, and welcome to your note videos on introducing cells. You should have previously learned about cells when we talked about characteristics of life, as cells are one of the several characteristics of life. Cells are very small. Your skin is made of cells. However, you're not going to see the cells unless you put them under a microscope. That's because cells are microscopically small. Now, while cells are very small, they can stack together and build into larger and larger structures, such as organs like the heart or the lungs, organ systems like respiratory systems or digestive systems, and even as large as an organism. You are an organism composed of cells. Soon after the development and discovery of cells came the cell theory. In order to understand what the cell theory is, we first must need to understand what a theory is. What is a theory? A theory is a well-supported explanation that is based on observations, experiments, and repeated trials. How I like to remember this is that a hypothesis is I think. When I make a hypothesis, I am stating what I think without having done an experiment yet. A theory comes after an experiment. It's a we think. Now that we've done this experiment several times and gotten the same conclusion, we think that this is what it is. That is what a theory is. So what is the cell theory? So the cell theory came after improvements in the microscope allowed scientists to discover cells. The cell theory describes properties of cells that are facts as we know them. There are three things stated in the cell theory. The first, that all living things are made of cells. The second, that cells are the basic unit of life. And the third, that all cells come from other cells. Cells just can't appear out of nowhere. They have to come from other cells. When we're talking about cells, cells can either be found on their own as unicellular organisms or in a group as multicellular organisms. Uni in unicellular means one. Multi in multicellular means more than one. Examples of unicellular organisms include bacteria, certain protista, but a great example is from SpongeBob. Plankton is a unicellular organism. His whole body is just one cell big. Multicellular organisms are all other life on Earth. So those are things like animals, plants, dogs, spiders, earthworms, and even mushrooms are all multicellular, meaning their bodies are composed of more than one cell that have stacked and built to this organism. So let's review. Unicellular organisms, their bodies are made of one cell. Multicellular organisms, their bodies are made of many cells. So take a look at these two different cells. Can you spot two similarities and two differences? You might notice in the writing that each cell has DNA. That is a similarity. That's because all cells have DNA. Any other similarities? Similarities might be hard to find between these two cells. However, the differences are vast. So, the two cells you saw a picture of, one is a prokaryotic cell and the other is a eukaryotic cell. The prokaryotic cells are basic cells. They're small and they're simple. So a great example of prokaryotic cells is bacteria. Bacteria are very small, very simple, and they're unicellular, meaning you don't find bacteria made of more than one cell. Bacteria can be found everywhere, from the top of the volcano to inside your gut. So what are prokaryotic cells? They are small, they are simple, they are single-celled, also called unicellular. But the big difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells is where their DNA is stored. In prokaryotic cells, they have no nucleus. Pro is no. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. Their DNA is free to float around the cell. It is not contained. So take a look at this prokaryotic cell. All right, in this prokaryotic cell, you see the DNA in the middle. DNA is its control center, but it doesn't always have to remain in the center. It can be floating around the cell. Nothing is keeping it in place. The reason why I say floating around the cell is because the cell is filled with this jelly filling called cytoplasm, kind of like a giant pool. Inside of that giant pool, you see all those little dots or beach balls? Those are ribosomes. Ribosomes' job is to build protein. Ribosomes are found in all cells, not just prokaryotic cells. Now, the barrier of our pool is our cell membrane. It holds all the cytoplasm inside. On the outside of the cell are two different hair-like structures. The flagella is kind of like a tail. It helps the cell swim around. The pili, or the villi, are the little hairs. They also help the cell move. Now that we've talked about prokaryotic cells, let's talk about eukaryotic cells, the far more common cell. Eukaryotic cells are large and complex. These are the kind of cells you have. So they are larger, more complex cells, but specifically, their DNA is contained within that center called a nucleus. Kind of looks like an eyeball. So that nucleus is the control center because that's where all of the DNA is housed. Examples of organisms that have eukaryotic cells are plants and animals. Eukaryotic cells, you have them. You do have a nucleus. These are the cells that humans have. So, what do these two very different cells have in common? Take a look at these pictures and notice if you can spot some similar words. An easy one to spot is right in the middle of your page, ribosomes. Ribosomes are found in all cells. That's because ribosomes make protein and all cells need protein. You might also see that on the outside of each cell is a cell membrane, and on the inside of each cell is the cytoplasm, that jelly filling. So, what do they have in common? Cytoplasm, cell membrane, ribosomes, and even though one has a nucleus and one does not, they both have DNA. So that is also a similarity. So, take a look at this picture. Tell me, which one of these cells is a prokaryotic cell? If you answered cell number 1, you are correct. That cell is small and simple. That is a prokaryotic cell. Take a look at this cell. Is it prokaryotic or eukaryotic? If you answered eukaryotic, you are correct. I know it's eukaryotic because I can see a nucleus up here, that dark spot. Pro or U? You should have answered U again, because again, there is a nucleus. These are both eukaryotic cells because, why? They are unicellular or because they have a nucleus. If you've been following along, this should have been an easy answer. It's because they both have a nucleus. How about this cell? Prokaryotic or eukaryotic? If you're looking at the labeling of this cell, you will see that it does have DNA. However, that DNA is floating around. There's nothing to contain it, like a nucleus. So because there's no nucleus, it's prokaryotic. Pro is no. This is a prokaryotic cell. This is a eukaryotic cell. Which one of these is more complex? Or another way of asking this is which one has more parts? You should have answered the cell on the right, eukaryotic, all right, because it has more parts inside. It's a busier looking cell. That's the end of our notes. You are going to continue on to do the pro versus eukaryotic Venn diagram. Feel free to reference back to the slides or the video to help you complete it.